Women fear gaining weight. Fear is the root emotion of what women are feeling when they come to somebody like me and have a conversation about weight loss. They're afraid. And I want to unpack why women are afraid to either gain weight or spend another minute stuck at their current weight or shape or size. Where does this fear come from? I've uncovered about 8 different sources of it. But first, I want to corroborate the fact that fear is the root emotion. So, have you ever heard of the feelings wheel? The feelings wheel, sometimes called the emotion wheel. Well, you can go to feelingswheel.com and they'll show you this big feelings wheel. In the middle of the feelings wheel are the root feelings, and as the wheel sort of fans out to the outer rim, it demonstrates the sort of secondary and tertiary feelings that, ultimately anchor back to these 7 base feelings. So the 7 base feelings, the 7 root feelings are fear, anger, disgust, sad, happy, surprised, and bad. Okay. So those are our 7 root feelings. Now, if we take the fearful sort of slice of the pie, the fear slice of the pie, and we fan it out, we have things like anxious, insecure, weak, rejected, threatened, nervous, exposed, excluded, insignificant, worthless, inferior, inadequate, frightened, overwhelmed, hopeless. Those are all the words women use when they come to me seeking weight loss. They want to talk to me about weight loss, and that's what we do. I just have a conversation with women about weight loss. Take me through what this journey has been like for you. What's going on? How do you feel? And it's all these feelings, and they all anchor back to the root emotion, which is fear. Fear. Why are we so afraid? Women's fear of gaining weight often goes far beyond concerns about their physical health. So right out the gate, I just do want to dispel that possible myth. It's not usually a health concern that women are afraid about. Now, I will say that is coming up a little more often as I age and my clients age. My clients who are now women in their late 40s or early 50s are watching their moms and their aunts and maybe their sisters, their cousins, their family, their loved ones age and becoming unwell. Maybe you watched your mom or your aunts become diabetic. I certainly watched my mom become diabetic and ultimately die of a heart attack. That's incredibly scary. That is a true source of fear. But I will say that the women I speak to, when they talk about why it's so important to lose weight and what will life be like if they stay stuck where they are now, the emotions that come up are fear, and it's not usually pertinent to health concerns. The predominant root emotion is tied to deeper, more complex societal, psychological, and cultural factors. So I found eight categories of fear that lie beneath women's weight loss struggles. So number 1 is a fear of rejection and lack of belonging. So in some cases, this is tribal. Okay, whoa. Tribal instincts. At a primal human level, we are wired to seek acceptance within our tribe. That's way old in our DNA. And anything that threatens inclusion triggers deep fear. Okay, this is actually, I think is pretty cool. This is true from an evolutionary biology standpoint, which I literally geek out on that stuff. I think that's so fun to contemplate. Because that goes back so far. It's completely out of our purview. We can't do anything about that. And by the way, that sounds nihilistic, but I actually find a great deal of comfort in that. Oh, I'm wired this way. Okay, part of it is how I'm wired. So anything that threatens inclusion into the tribe, like weight gain in a culture that stigmatizes it, more on that in a second, this triggers deep genetic fear. That goes back a long ways. But then we have sort of the modern human experience of this, the cultural conditioning. So modern society, at least in developed nations, most of them equates thinness with attractiveness, with worthiness, and with success. And women fear gaining weight because it could lead to rejection or judgment, socially, romantically, professionally, you name it. And, you hear stories about this. I've heard stories about this, about women, especially, this is sort of an adjacent concept, but the idea of anti-aging, the anti-aging industry, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry as well. I mean, the weight loss industry is a $190 billion industry globally, and the beauty industry is probably right on its heels. Like, truly, they're different industries, but they're very closely linked. The beauty industry is interesting because we're fighting aging. And I've had this pushback. I've had this conversation with people where they'll say, yeah, aging gracefully is nice, but we are being ageified out of the workforce. If we show up for a job interview and we look old, we might not be considered for that role because, society's looking for the young, hip, vibrant woman to join the ranks. So, I think there's something there. I believe there's something there. And this is absolutely true. The cultural conditioning about our worthiness is so connected to being thin. Thinness is connected to this idea of attractiveness, worthiness, success. That's unfortunately true. I just need to validate that. I'm doing a lot of validating here. I really just want to uncover and talk about why this fear exists. Name it and tame it, baby. I don't know. Now, I push back on this a little bit because I don't know, this is sort of an anecdotal perspective, but I've been very thin. I've been very thin. I've also been very lean. I've been very curvy. I've been every shape and size that there could be. And I don't believe, and I'm trying to be very objective, but when I say this, I don't believe I was really treated much differently when I was in those different body shapes. I will say, I will acknowledge my privilege. I was never very, very, very obese. I was always a normal sized, like a straight sized person. But for example, when I had a six pack, nobody thought I was more amazing than I am now that I don't have a six pack. It just doesn't actually play out the way we think it's going to, where this society equating thinness with worthiness, it doesn't often play out in sort of the day-to-day life of just regular humans like us. We're not movie stars. We're not in the public eye. We're really living a pretty small and tightly knit life with people who love us. And I don't know, who cares what the culture thinks? I mean, that's easier said than done. But cultural conditioning. So the first category is our fear of rejection and lack of belonging. And there's two subcategories. First of all is our tribal instincts. And number two is our cultural conditioning. Now, my second category is loss of control. So weight gain often feels like a loss of control over our body. And this can parallel fears of just losing control of life in general. I think women, a lot of the ones I speak to, we are high achieving project manager types. We are very in control. We are taking care of the needs of many people around us, quite often putting ourselves on the back burner. And this sense of control and organization that we have, we feel like we're losing it when we're losing control of our body, or if you've lost control of your finances, if you've lost control of, your kids, whenever you feel like you're losing control of any one of the threads that you're kind of holding on to, that is a fear-inducing feeling. So there's just a feeling of loss of control. And this fear is exacerbated by societal messaging. The societal messaging is that discipline and willpower and consistency and all these sort of buzzwords that bros use, this helps us dictate our body size. If your body size isn't the perfect right shape and size, then you must be undisciplined. You must be inconsistent. Gaining weight feels like a personal failure. I'm not measuring up to the societal expectation again, right? The messaging. So it feels like we're losing control. Other people are more controlled than me. I'm a flawed human because I've lost control over this thing. I need to be more disciplined. I need to have more willpower. It's that sort of white knuckling of control. That's not a healthy feeling. It doesn't feel good to want to feel in control. The word control is one that I have a love-hate relationship with in my weight loss practice, because one of the things I help people with is controlling their appetite. Okay, so we have a quieter appetite, cravings go away, sugar binges vanish, all this stuff. And I'll say, isn't it nice to feel like you have more control over your appetite? You don't feel like you're such a slave or such a defective human. And whenever the word control comes out of my mouth, I really hesitate. I hesitate to say it. I often want to claw it back after I have said it. It's not my favorite word. Let's all put our heads together and thesaurus this. What other word could I use besides control? Anyway, loss of control. That's one of the other reasons why women, fear gaining weight. Number 3, fear of visibility and fear of invisibility. So, fear of visibility. For some women, weight gain can lead to feelings of increased judgment and unwanted attention. Um, I feel like this is sort of the body stigma thing that we see where people fat shaming, people seem to feel like they're within their rights to comment on a fat person's body as though it's somehow their opinion somehow matters. So anyway, that happens. And when women are gaining weight, the fear of being now lumped into this category, I'm visibly overweight, I'm now part of the problem, and potentially being scrutinized or ridiculed is extremely fear-inducing. I would say objectively fear-inducing. And then the fear of invisibility. So wild how when I was thinking through this, there's so many coins that have the two sides. Well, coins have two sides, but almost every single one of these has the flip side of the coin, which is also a factor. So the fear of invisibility, weight gain makes us feel like we're less desirable, we're less important, we have less influence, especially in a culture that prioritizes beauty and youth and thinness as the standards for beauty and worthiness, right? So it's all coming together, right? So we fear both. We gain weight, it's like, on one hand, I'm going to become too visible. On the other hand, I'm going to become invisible. And that's so fearful because there's just no reprieve there. Number 4, internalized shame and perfectionism. So women often internalize cultural messaging that their value is tied to their appearance. I think this is a big problem. I think this is a pretty big problem. And one of the sort of adjacent concepts I think about when I think of this is self-objectification. So as long as women believe their worthiness is tied to how they look, and we internalize that belief, then we're behaving as if our appearance matters more than anything in the world. And we're presenting ourselves from that place of belief. Now it's compounding. Now we've bought into it. It's sort of manifesting itself, right? Because I believe that my worthiness is tied to how I look, I therefore try to look really good, and then I get the appropriate, praise from the culture, and then bring it back in, and I'm elevating it, it's compounding, and it's really internalized, and it's this pattern that's extremely hard to break. So weight gain triggers shame because it conflicts with this ideal that we've been conditioned to strive for and that we've been pouring our hearts and souls into since, I don't know about you, but since I was a teenager. I'm an old woman now. No, I'm not. I'm 48 years old, but for 30 years of my life, just about, I spent in this spiral of shittiness, making sure I looked good enough to get the praise and the necessary accolades I needed so that I could be in the culture and so I could make sure to look good enough, and just the spiral continues. It's this conditioning we've been sort of born into and really perpetuated. We were born into it. We have perpetuated it. It's not our fault. It's also not your mom's fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's how the culture kind of evolved around us. I don't know what the root of it is. I don't know if it's the patriarchy. I'm sorry, I don't know. I feel about the patriarchy the same way I feel about raw milk. I don't know enough about the patriarchy to start talking about it. I don't know enough about raw milk to talk about it. I'm not going to do it. But there's something here with our internalized culture messages. And what's interesting about this is, gals, this is inside of us. It's inside of us. And it was kind of put there, was kind of that little seed was planted by the cultural conditioning, and then we watered it. That's where I come up with this idea of self-objectification. What if we didn't care so much about how hot we were? Could we maybe generationally nip this in the bud by just not caring as much about being hot? Easier said than done. And then we have the perfectionism. So we have shame and perfectionism, this internalized perfectionism. Women believe they have to be perfect, and we sometimes believe that we are more perfect than we actually are. We really think that we have hit this peak of perfection, and any hit to that is a catastrophe. But I would push back on that and say, I don't think any of us is actually perfect. So, hey, the pressure's off. If you really anchor to this idea of being a perfectionist, and that's your identity statement, then any deviation from perfection, it feels like a catastrophe. And catastrophes are scary, and that's why you feel scared and fearful. So My thinking here is to reframe your own perspective on your own perfectionism. Maybe you're just a regular old human doing a regular old life, and you don't have to be perfect. Okay. Number 5, fear of loss of identity. Women are beautiful. We are the beautiful things. We are the beautiful things. And yes, there's a tribal element to that. There's a modern cultural element to that. And we just are. We just are beautiful. We're soft. We're pretty. We have facial features. We are pretty things. And that can be true, but also it doesn't have to necessarily dictate everything. It's not our whole identity. We're not ornamental. That's not our purpose here. We just happen to be pretty. We just happen to be the beautiful things. But for many women, their identity is closely tied to how they look. And weight gain can feel like an existential threat, a shift in how they see themselves and how they believe others see them. There's a lot of noise in your head. Existential threat. Why is our identity so closely tied to how we look? I mean, again, if you're listening to this, are you a movie star? Are you a supermodel? Probably not. You're probably a regular human like me. So, really, our identity isn't that closely tied to how we look. The people that love us don't love us for that reason. I'm telling you this, and it's like, I know it's like shouting into the void. And by the way, I'm saying this to myself too. I too am a woman who was born into a diet culture and has been battling it. And now it's my job to understand it. And I'm just here trying to understand. I'm trying to like figure out this Rubik's Cube. And it's a lot. I mean, I scribbled down 8 concepts here. Who knows how many more there are, right? So there are some women, though, some of us listening, who for whom your appearance has historically been a source of validation or power. I was a model when I was younger. I was celebrated for being pretty and thin. I was tall and skinny and pretty. And that's how you get to be a model in the 90s, right? That was the whole thing. And I hated it so much. Just so we're clear, I hated being a model. I am not cut out for it at all. I'm not good at it. I had no interest in doing it. I hated having it as part of my identity. I bailed on it as soon as I could. But, I know what that feels like. To feel like you have to show up looking that sort of ornamental, sort of fitting that mold. So for some women, your beauty has been historically a source of validation or power. That's hard. I want to validate that that's hard. Okay, number 6, economic and social consequences, of course. The economic and social aspects to weight loss and being a human in this modern era can never be overlooked. We can never overlook them. We can't talk about anything pertinent to health without talking about economic and social factors. Health, happiness. I mean, we can't talk about any topics as far as I'm concerned without factoring these in. So let's factor it in. Studies show that weight bias can influence job opportunities and promotions and income. This is borne out in the literature, and women fear tangible real-world penalties for weight gain. That is a tangible real-world penalty. You're making less money. You're having less opportunity. You're not able to grow. That's scary. I think that's really scary for women because I love the idea of women being very self-sufficient. We are such badasses, such badasses. And if our potential was limited because we don't look the right way, that makes me like red in the face angry. Red in the face angry. Don't love that for us. But it's a fact, right? Studies show. There's the social capital of being perceived as put together. You just seem like you're more competent when you look good. She really has her life together. Who knows? We just make assumptions based on a person's body shape, what they're wearing, their fashion sense, their hairstyle, and how put together they are somehow represents their worthiness or their qualifications. And so when your body shape is harder to look put together because if you're carrying extra weight and it's hard to look cute in the in trendy, stylish, fashionable, expensive clothes, this can deeply impact your self-esteem and, you know, and impact your opportunities. I think those things kind of are sort of, again, self-fulfilling. Like your self-esteem is low, so the opportunities, you don't go for them because you don't feel like you're going to measure up. And even if you did, people would think you didn't measure up. And it's, so many of these are self-fulfilling prophecies. There's spirals that we get into. They're loops, infinite loops of rumination, but good to talk about them. Then we have cultural narratives around health. So again, I go back to what I said at the beginning. I don't believe that fear of weight gain is usually primarily about health. I have to tell you that just as somebody who speaks to women on the phone just about every single day about their weight loss goals and hopes and dreams and what does this feel like when it's working for you and why is that important to you. Health is almost never, ever up for discussion. That's just true and that's okay. But the conflation of weight and health in societal messaging amplifies the fear. So, oh my gosh, not only am I undesirable and not getting the career opportunities that I deserve, but I might get diabetes. It's like, could it be any worse? Could it be any worse? It just compounds, it piles on, right? So women feel the fear because maybe there are health implications coming for them as well, as if this isn't hard enough to be perceived as unworthy and unattractive and unqualified. Oh, and I'm also going to be unhealthy. But then there's also the perception of being seen as unhealthy. Again, that goes back to my earlier point, which is like, you don't seem as put together. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not disciplined. You're not consistent. You're a lesser human, lazy, because you have extra weight. And we fear that judgment, rightfully so. We're trying to fit in with the tribe here, after all. We're trying to make it in this crazy world. Number 8 is fear of aging. This seems more prominent to my audience, my clientele, because we are aging. We're getting up there, right? We're in our late 40s, our early 50s, maybe beyond. And weight gain is often associated with aging, the chubby grandma, right? Menopause belly. So now we have that. We've got to factor into this cauldron of shittiness, which is not only do I have to constantly fight my battle for my whole life, but then I get older and then the fight gets harder because it's inevitable that you're going to gain weight when you're fat, and I'm already fat. And the fear of that, we really, honestly, the amount of rumination and spinning out that women do every year, the calendar flips over. Oh no, this is going to be the year I get fat. This is going to be the year I get fat. This is going to be the year I get permanently fat. And there's so much fear around that. And I think that fear, I just think, the pressure of that makes it really hard to lose weight. Actually, if you wanted to lose weight, ruminating and being under this much pressure is going to, I think, put a little bit of a block up for you there. So we have this fear, not only am I, overweight and need to lose it, but now I'm aging and now it's going to get harder and I'm going to get wrinkles. I'm going to have gray hair and my attractiveness is greatly depreciating. Major fear. The idea of loss of youth, vitality, and relevance in a culture that prioritizes these attributes for women is very fear-inducing. So all of this is to say that the fear of gaining weight is real. It's real. And it stems from more than the surface level reasons society claims. It's not because of health, usually. It's a tangle of identity, belonging, power, self-worth. And when women fear weight gain, when they express fear at being stuck at their current weight or gaining another pound or increasing to another pant size, when they express this fear, this terrified fear, they're often responding to a deep-seated, culturally imposed fear of becoming less than in the eyes of others and themselves. And it's not just the weight they fear losing control over, it's how they fit into the world. The fear is real.